As we are about to start our meeting today, our studies, we start with a message from the book Green Light by the Spirit André Luiz, the message entitled Antagonists.
Perhaps the opponent in whom we see perversity is only a sick person needing understanding. We should recognize that to us, very often, a person seems unworthy just because he does not share our points of view, no matter how weak our opponent know of yet, or even some truth about ourselves. If anybody has hurt you, forgive him immediately, thereby stopping evil as soon as it has started. Criticism of other people will only bring you damage if you allow it to be so. The best way of forgiving other people's mistake is by recognizing that we are able to make even worse mistakes than theirs. Opponents should be seen, first of all, as our brothers and sisters who may have different points of view. Allow people to live their own life, and they will allow you to live your life according to your choices. The more medical science progresses, the more it comprehends that hate, which is transformed into vengeance, condemnation, resentment, envy, or hostility, is the cause of much illness, and that the unique, effective medicine against such disasters of the soul is forgiveness with love.
In that way, we start our harmonization in this ambient where we find ourselves as learners as we all are. May we choose to relax our minds and hearts and start our meeting by expressing our gratitude towards these unique and special moments in our existences. Ourselves and all of those in spirit, understanding that the natural laws are the teachings presented to all humanity, be us in the flesh, and all of those in spirit who are with us, those brothers and sisters in humanity, those who are here learning with us, those who are here also choosing to enlighten their minds, actualizing our belief systems, our values, our concepts, according to the greatest law in the universe, which is love. We all go through learnings that sometimes can be challenging, but we learn from them, developing our intelligence, developing our emotional intelligence too, and also seeking to develop their spiritual intelligence. And in that way, as brothers and sisters, united by universal fraternity, embracing us in the wilderness of good, we start our study today. So be it. As always, we carry on our studies then. Remember that our study is interactive, that all can participate as we are continue our studying about Spiritism inspiring lives. And today the subject that we will be focusing on will be hope therapy. And we learn a bit about by the Spirit benefactor Joana de Angelis, which is a great spirit already helping us humanity to get to know ourselves and also to evolve in terms of understanding who we are, where we are coming from, what we are doing on earth, where we are going from here, what is the objective of existence. And today, let's see what we can learn from her regarding hope therapy. What do we understand as immortal beings in relation to hope therapy? What may come to us when we hear the title?
Not giving up.
Let's say, let ourselves go on and the experiences go by and we haven't learned, okay? Let's see what we learn together here. Then Joana de Angelis starts by saying, in human relationships, the predominance of ego is responsible for incessant frustrations and other imbalances that are characteristic of the human being. So now reflecting, How is that coming to us today, understanding that we are all evolving and therefore our thoughts, our belief systems, our concepts also evolve. But today, how do we understand that? Also as immortal beings, taking the opportunity for us to develop our ability to express ourselves. What is she referring to?
I think we are always frustrated with each other. Be at home, could be at work, could be anywhere. And when she says that this is the predominance of ego that leads to frustrations, I was just thinking, okay, but what is the definition of ego, and why is the ego that makes us feel so frustrated?
Why is it? When she says predominance of ego is responsible for incessant frustrations. So now we learn here and other imbalances. So that we learn now here that actually our frustrations or other imbalanced characteristics are not coming from situations outside us, are not coming from other people. Because she is referring predominance of ego of each individual in relation to relationships. If each one of us as unique beings in the universe take responsibility to get to know where we are in our ego state of mind and take responsibility, understanding what are the causes of our frustrations, and we re-educate from that level onwards, then we will no longer feel so much frustrated in relation to the limitations of others. Because when we don't take responsibility, then we blame others. And in that way, we keep on fortifying our ego. Ego is the center of our consciousness, but sometimes it's quite unbalanced through our shadows, our limitations, our illusions, our untruth that we bring as values from previous existences or even within this existence, which needs to be actualized as we choose now through these studies within Spiritism is inspiring us to connect with the essence of ourselves, where we bring the divine values or the higher potentials of the soul and choose to take responsibility with this internal autonomy to potentialize ourselves through these new internal behaviors that we develop.
Ego is not the same as our shadows, is it?
The ego is the center of our consciousness. But in the stage when we are very immature or when we are blaming each other, that means we have a very weak ego, a very unbalanced ego. What does it mean? Based on values, on concepts outside the reality, based on the natural law, which is the law of God. And now that we are learning who we are and get to know which aspects of the ego bring the difficulties, frustrations in ourselves, and we take responsibility and re-educate ourselves, we actually are actualizing the ego departing from the self. And that way frustrated because we are reviewing our expectations that we have in relation to people or situations. Does that make sense? And in that actualization process, we develop values, belief systems, which are more updated in relation to the concept of the natural laws. That brings us back to potentializing ourselves in be more patient, be more tolerant, respecting others, flexibilizing ourselves, learning to be more indulgent, to be more benevolent, to be more forgiving, to be more loving, and all of that will really shift our internal process. Correct? Now we move to the next one. Would you like to read that for us, please?
Considering that interpersonal relationships is an art of disguising true feelings, the individual wears a corresponding mask that will vary according to the circumstances, occasions, and persons with which one interacts with. Interpersonal relationship is my relationship with myself. Interpersonal?
Interpersonal, considering that interpersonal relationship is an art. Interpersonal, I think, is between people.
Okay.
Yes? Between people is an art of disguising true feelings. What is Ranjan's teaching here? Is that still happening these days? Quite a lot. Do we have examples here? Why do we do that? It's interesting that she's coming from the previous slide, which will refer to the ego. So our false values or illusions or concepts in pretending to be who we are not then now she's saying that comes up, is an art of disguising true feelings. The individual wears a corresponding mask that will vary according to the circumstances, occasions, and persons with which one interacts with. So how is that coming to us?
I think it happens all the time. We might have a completely different feeling for someone, or we wear a mask to interact with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the frustration.
Then comes the frustration, yeah? Yes. And why do we use masks? Why do we disguise the real feelings?
I think there are many reasons, but the ones that comes, which is my case, is perhaps could be people pleasing. Even if I have, let's say, not antagonist feelings towards someone, let's say a family member, but I don't know, I would never treat the family member in a bad way. But I cannot be true to my feelings because I feel the need to treat this person really, really well.
So we are learning to be aware of what comes up, but also learning not to freely let it out, because then we wouldn't have any filter. And we will be learning in these interpersonal relationships on a daily basis, on family, society, workplace, that we are learning to be more truthful to ourselves, that we don't need to be, let's say, carry on feeling the antagonism in relation to someone, as the example that you gave. But when I realized that I learned to be responsible, as we saw previously, I take responsibility and I re-educate myself in learning to respect that person. And in that way, I'm changing my belief systems, I'm actualizing them, my behavior as well, and then I'm also actualizing my emotions. But it doesn't mean that immediately the feeling will change, but I just don't act on it. I learn to be more honest. And that makes the change within. It's gradual. We cannot change very rarely, immediately, instantly, our emotions. But changing the way that we choose to behave, which is always like respecting if there is antagonism, observing what our belief systems are, because in order to feed our antagonism, for sure, we have belief systems which are based on the ego, which are rooted on pride and selfishness, based on our previous experiences, which could be in this existence or others. And now that we are becoming aware, we choose in the present to re-edit our belief systems according to our new ways of understanding life. Certainly. So we have different ways, and we do some levels of masks that we use is necessary in the way that we are, as long as we choose truly, freely, internally to be more honest with ourselves. And be honest with ourselves doesn't mean to be honest with the other and let out everything with no filter. Is that making sense?
But when is a mask always something negative? What about when people say fake it until you...
And also, as more as we become aware what we are internally feeling, not always is convenient for me to be open and express it, isn't it? We also need to know where we are, with who we are, in which situation. Otherwise, we would really even make things worse. Then people may not be ready to hear that, or otherwise I maybe just express it because I'm giving free will from the ego level onwards. I just want to diminish somebody else. So we also need to learn to discern, learn to be wise in which way we are using and expressing ourselves. Hello. So we carry on then on the next one, which says, the individual who is used to appearances displaces oneself from reality. By doing so, one starts feeling insecure in the traps that one prepares in order to block others from getting to know of one's real self. So what is that now bringing to us?
I think this is to the other end, when there are cases I have seen where people pretend to be someone else, like they new identity, a new name, or they stole an identity of someone, and they sometimes believe this is their reality when it's not. And I don't know if it might be a disease, a mental disease or something. I think in this case, it's not when we use the mask in a health way to develop a virtue, for example, but when we use it to take advantage of something.
Okay, good. That's it, yes. So why would we take advantage of something?
Because of some vices we have?
Some vices that we have, secondary gains that sometimes maybe even unconscious, to disguise or, let's say, bad feelings or whatever is going on. But that doesn't help us to bring ourselves back to the center and feel more secure, because the only way is to get to know those limitations from a departing point that we are already valuable human beings, and then welcome accepting ourselves in a loving way and trying to work and exercise ourselves in overcoming those limitations, so that we believe in us that we are already valuable human beings, that we don't need to pretend to be in a certain way, although we are training constantly. And then the next one says, the individual begins to imitate those who one observes to triumph by means of fantasy and adulation despite their inconsequent conduct. What is the benefactor presenting to us here in our learning process?
Try to copy someone we want to be like.
Okay, so we try to copy others, yeah? That we think they are triumphing, yeah? And what do we learn within Spiritism in terms of copying others?
We are all unique. We always say
there's no copy and paste, yes? Why? Because we all have been created simple and ignorant, and we all are unique beings in the universe. Therefore, there's no copy and paste. Yes, while we are developing our own identity, we may look at other people and feel inspired by them, because we all have people who know more than we do, who are more advanced than we are, and we can observe them in terms of developing our own unique way of being, but never in a way of being equal than others. That is disturbance. In that way, we will really feel frustrated and really disturb ourselves.
And Nancy Guimarães gives a very good example. She says, when we're going out and then we call someone to ask you what they're going to wear, so we wear the same. She said, it's so subtle, but it's very...
Yes, that is a way that shows, what is that showing underneath?
Lack of self-love.
That I don't have my own identity in terms of values, so much so that I even don't know what to wear. I need to ask others what I should be wearing, what they think would be nice to me. So when we develop our own identity, as I mentioned, our own individuality, that is part for each spirit to develop their own values, their own tastes, their own likes, their own dislikes. So that is part of self-love. And then I have my way of being. It doesn't matter. When I go out, I choose what to wear. I don't need to ask others, because we will never feel really truly safe or secure when we only ask others what we should be doing. Yeah? It's the same as others who go to the restaurant, for instance, a couple or friends. And then we may ask, well, what would you like? And then a person may say, anything. What is that telling?
They don't want to make a choice.
I don't know what I want. And then I can always blame others later on. Well, you choose that. But it really shows that I don't have my own voice. I don't know what I like. I like some fries. Really? Yes.
And what do you do to help someone who's like that? What do you tell them?
What do you tell them?
If they tell you, I don't know what I like.
Then you can help in a subtle way. For instance, well, choose. We have this and this option. Which one would you like to? Which one would you prefer? So it's almost, our language needs to be to transfer the responsibility, which will empower the person to start to do that. Because if we always do, then we are responsible to disempower the person. And then we are also responsible the other to be dependent on us. Is that making sense? Okay, here and there it's okay, I don't know, choose whatever you want to. But always, that means that I don't have my own resources. Then carry on. Read the next one for us, please.
Inner conflicts are then established. The scale of value loses its meaning, and the parameters for comprehension of losses, rights, or wrongs appears. And here come the parameters again.
Say?
Here come the parameters again.
The parameters, when I was studying at home, I remember you, because last year we were paranoid about the parameters. I said, today, Cynthia, you have more parameters here. So, inner conflicts are then established. This scale of values loses the meanings and the parameters of comprehension of what is right and wrong disappears. How do you understand that?
We completely lose the focus of the reference. We should have the reference within, but it's outside.
Yes.
There is a conflict.
Yes, because this is what I meant previously. I gave the example of a restaurant, yeah? The person never knows what, and then the conflicts, of course. Will I feel safe in that way? No. Is that making sense? Yeah. Right and wrong. What is right and wrong? What are the parameters in that? Go back to Cynthia. What are the parameters here?
You can say where are you getting them from? Because we usually get them from study and self-studying, and then we establish this is right, this is wrong, and then it will change after a while because we are constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
But if your focus is outside, imagine if your parameter is someone else.
That is really conflicting.
A lot of conflict.
Yes, and then again we come
the
frustration, the masks that we previously saw. I need to pretend to be the best way for all of us. We all are learning. It is to recognize our ignorance, let's put it like that, or our limitation, but take responsibility. Well, I notice it each time when we go out. I don't have my own opinions. I always ask somebody else. Let me ask myself, what kind of food do I like? I don't need to like others, but what kind of food do I like? And also be flexible, have my own opinion, later on also follow what others may suggest, but have my values. It's the same with colors. Sometimes you ask people, which is your favorite color? I don't know. I never thought about it. And then you may ask people, oh, what is your favorite taste? I don't know. What's your favorite style of dressing? I don't know. Can we imagine now how we feel really in that condition? Very unsafe, very insecure, low self-esteem. We don't trust ourselves. We always think that others are better than us. When in reality, right or wrong, it depends where we are. Because as more as we evolve, more we realize, oh my God, that wasn't correct. But there and then it was. But as we carry on, we change and actualize ourselves. It's all about learning. Yeah? This rigidity is right and wrong, black and white. There are different elements within the two. Yeah? But always bringing back to evaluate from within. In social meetings, individuals reduce themselves to the dance of masks. Once those moments of conventionality are overcome, the identification of the individual's cowardice will end this disturbance of neurotic behavior. What is Joanna Janges teaching us here? Any idea? In social media, she's referring again in relation to the social aspects of our existences, isn't it?
I think she's saying it's us again, pretending to be someone we are not.
Okay.
And we have to be with ourselves.
Okay. And it's still what she's saying here, although the book was written many, many years ago, but it's quite updated to these days still. We still are there. And then this is why we have in society so many people who are so unsatisfied, who are so depressed or so insecure, or a lot of people also who are out in society but very dependable on alcohol, so that it can soothe those wounds and those limitations in order to shut down the conscious mind so that it can be temporarily in a different state. Is that making sense? Then Joanna Janges carries on saying, when called up again to a social gathering, the individual hides themselves on legitimate inner state and returns to dissimulation. How can we choose then to go interact in the social gathering in a more, let's say, legitimate way? Not to dissimulate. How can we learn to do that?
Show something that you don't like.
Okay, so you learn to accept ourselves as loving beings as we already are. Evolving and loving doesn't mean perfect, means evolving and learning constantly and be willing to actualize ourselves. But in order to actualize, I need to get to know myself first, isn't it? In order for me to know what to change when I'm in social gathering. What could come up in social gathering for us as beings in evolution? What kind of internal aspects that we may temporarily dissimulate?
Like thinking about now family, and we could put the mask on and then start the gathering really well and then end up at a fight.
Have a fight. Could I also be saying that I could be masquerading insecurity in a social level? Could I also masquerade or dissimulate inferior complex? How can we do that? How can I dissimulate inferior complex? An idea? Sometimes we are in social gathering that maybe, it's not saying that all the cases are, but sometimes it's when we are seeking attention for everyone, or what we want to be the center of the group where we are and talking all the time, because it's very uncomfortable, very difficult just to be in silence. Is that making sense? So observing our behaviors, if you can interact, where we also have the initiative to talk, when we have the initiative to silence, and we still are okay emotionally. If not, we can train ourselves in that. Any other example? In family, how can we do that? How can we be more congruent with ourselves in family level?
Be silent.
Be silent sometime, and not only silent in terms of not expressing words, which is already an advance in some level, but also learn to be silent on the emotional level. Be less reactive, be less defensive. How do we become less defensive?
When we learn to love more.
When we learn to forgive, which is a training of self-love. When we learn to respect others as they are. Okay. Then carry on the next one, Cynthia, read it very loud.
Although the expressive majority of individuals prefer the game of personalities, it is not possible to ignore the prevalence of suffering that results from that. They deny truth to themselves. They refuse self-encounter. They run away from the awakening of values that reside dormant in themselves, and due to that, they succumb.
Okay. So now that we carry on our reflections, what is coming to us? If you take the first phrase from the paragraph, although the expressive majority of individuals prefer the game of personalities, it is not possible to ignore the prevalence of suffering that results from that. How do we understand that? Prefer the game of personalities. What is that about?
When we put the masks and pretend to be what we are not.
Mm-hmm. How we think we should be behaving in terms of being accepted, how we think that we need to act in terms of being loved, in terms of being part of a group. Yeah. Then it is not possible to ignore the prevalence of suffering that results from that. What are the consequences of this way of being? The game of personalities. Are there consequences in that way of being?
Yes.
Which are?
The frustrations, as she said in the beginning.
Frustrations, deceptions. Because although we prefer this game, but why is that bringing the sufferings back to us? Oops, sorry. Why is that happening? Essentially, who are we?
We are spirits.
We are immortal spirits, and we carry within the real values and germs, isn't it? So if I masquerade them and pretend to play around in a, let's say, distorted way, that will bring consequences, because that is not feeding me on the soul level onwards, on the essence level onwards. Frustrations, deceptions, fights sometimes, people distance from each other because they are not dealing with their own individual responses that come up. Sadness, depression sometimes, if that goes on for a long time, family-wise sometimes, or in certain relationships. Dissatisfaction, unfulfillment, and that can lead then towards alcohol issues, which is really the element of soothing those emotional wounds that we carry within. Then Joanna carries on, they deny truth to themselves. They refuse self-encounter. What do we learn by that phrase? They deny through to themselves. How is that coming to us? They deny through to themselves. Do you have an idea?
Is it lack of self-acceptance?
It's lack of, let's say, internal connection from the self level onwards. They deny through themselves. We may not have learned to be loyal, to be more honest with us, because we know our limitations or our shadows, and we fear to connect with them or to accept them, so we hide them. But in order to do that, we disturb ourselves more and more. So learn to be truthful to ourselves, departing that we are loving beings, and then learn to be sincere and honest with us. Despite of our limitations, we can train how to be different. And if we don't do that, we are really refusing the self-encounter here, which is rational and emotional, conscious and unconscious, or self and ego. If the ego predominates, then we are very unstable. But when we are aware of our limitations on the ego level, and we choose from the self level, which is the essence of ourselves, to restructure ourselves, then the shadows will not dominate us. We are in control of them, as we are participating actively and consciously in this re-education process. The main point is to learn to value us as valuable human beings as we already are, although imperfect. Because through the lack of the low self-esteem, the lack of self-value, we always pretend to be who we are not, but in that way we are working. That's quite liberating. Then Joanna carries on saying, they run away from the awakening of values that reside dormant in themselves, and due to the fact they succumb. How do we succumb? Examples. If we follow this procedure of lack of self-encounter. How do we succumb? In which way? Which kind of behaviors?
Could be suicide.
We could consider, we enter into a self-obsessive negative thought level, and in that way we can become very depressive. We can become even whatever, psychotic in sometimes through these negatives, and also could become suicidal. We may think there's no other way. The only way is to end my life because I cannot handle this, I cannot cope with that anymore. But that is an illusion, isn't it? Why? Why would that be an illusion if I would consider suicide in that state? Because it becomes very uncomfortable if we refuse to address our own issues. And why is suicide not a solution for that?
Because we learn that we are immortal spirits, and that death is only of the physical body. And once we come back into a new body, back to Earth, we'll have to face the same challenges again. We have to be from the same point we stopped. We will have to go through until we learn, and we get the skills we need to.
Correct. No one dies. We are learning about Spiritism. We are all immortal beings. We are not a physical body. So even if I try to do something with the physical body, I will not end my suffering. I'm a psychological and emotional being in essence. And therefore I carry on alive, and I will be surprised that I'm still alive. I haven't reached or achieved what I'm aiming, and I still have great pain to overcome. So it's worthwhile to ask for help if we need, in case we find ourselves trapped in this negative aspect. Because life is a gift from God given to all of us, and all of us are going through challenging moments as learners as we are, partially in redoing our old ways of being, but also partially sometimes is because it's new learning that we undergo. We constantly are challenged to break our comfort zones. And then Joanna carries on here, which is quite nice. I will read it from the book. She says that a story tells us about a wise man that proposed himself to pass on his knowledge. Many interested people joined him. While classes continued, the number of trainees decreased until there was only one candidate left. Then the master said, I will only continue if there is a bigger number of disciples. interest in learning, the candidate appealed to the deserters and asked them to return. However, he did not succeed in convincing them. After a long meditation, he decided to take to the classroom dummies that he obtained in a commercial house. He placed them in the room and invited the master to return to the lessons. Astonished, the master said, "All of those dummies are incapable of understanding me. They are merely dummies." "You are right," said, "they are dead, unfruit. They represent those who left. Even when they were here, they were like dead people, showing no interest in learning. Your glasses were very deep, and they did not want them. But I am interested in them." The wise man then made him his ideal apprentice to continue his experience. What are we taking from that? I wonder if this school is Earth. A lot of people run away, they don't want to know, it's too deep. Studying about life, about ourselves, about universal laws. I don't want to know that. What else came to us here? Or what touched our hearts when we heard that? Is it those who deserted, or is the one who stayed? What do you have to say?
I think the one who stayed was quite impressive, like he really wanted to learn.
He was very creative. He wanted to convince the professor or the master to carry on with the lessons because he really was determined and he was really feeding his needs. But again, shows how different, how unequal we are in terms of what we are willing to learn. So when he convinced them, the master said, "Well, all of those numbers that you were considering, they were dead people here." What does it mean? Can that happen with us sometimes when we are doing a class? Yes. We are present physically, but we are not present spiritually. We are not present psychically. So therefore, we may have a number of 50 people, but how many are really there to learn, who are really open, who are really willing to learn? That's a good lesson here, isn't it?
We may be looking at the phone and thinking about something else.
Yes, physically we are present, but we are distracted. Correct. So the moral of the story is about let's be present, let's be willing to go deeper within in order to get to know who we are, in order to study more, in order to renew ourselves, in order to learn to be more hopeful in life. As I mentioned previously, we don't need to put ourselves down and think that we don't have any value because we are who we are. No, within Spiritism we learn we all are beings of goodness already. We are our value, and we have already our value, although we have our limitations that we can change and actualize and train ourselves to be in a different way. That is quite hopeful, isn't it? Yes. Then we carry on. Would you like to read that for us, please?
Nowadays, the same happens to us in society that generates psychological disturbances in the behavior of its actors who present themselves in the day-to-day dramas, tragedies or comedies.
Would you like to comment?
I just think following on from what you said, sometimes people have psychological patterns. They want advice, but they're not interested in change.
But how is that when you say they want advice, but they are not interested in changing? What is that about us?
They just like lip service. They like the sound of good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe deep down they do want to change, but I've come across many people in my life, and it's a disservice to give them advice afterwards because you have to discern if the person is like this example.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it relates to this, but
I think yes, you are right. There are a lot of us who are sometimes even saying people, please tell me what to do. They come. And why are they not on the behavioral level doing it? Because we have the cognitive dimension and emotional dimension. So cognitively, on the conscious level, I may be even honest or not, but sometimes people are genuine. Please tell me what I should be doing because I really want to improve, I really want to get better. But when it comes to the moment that I need to testify my new way of being, because I'm dealing with my own emotional response, then I may fall back and allow again the emotion dominate my rational mind and carry on behaving as I always did. And in this way, as you rightly said, we can only help them to some extent, giving advice, but carry on doing the same thing will be feeding these dependence. Yeah? Because really when being is down to us to go and to behave accordingly. That's the challenging part.
Yeah, you encourage the pattern if you keep on.
You encourage.
And it's difficult as a human being to see them.
Yeah.
It's not about honoring the difficulty, it's about honoring the truth.
The truth?
So it doesn't matter what it is. It's about that. If you don't honor that, then you don't help anyone. You don't help, and you help them just to be more dependent on you. So it's not good for us, it's not good for them. And the reason that we are interacting with each other is learning and helping to empower us and empower others. How do we learn to empower us and others? How? Being honest with yourself.
Take responsibility. Remember when you mentioned, people come and ask me how to do things, and I say, but then at the end of the day, in the behavior level, they carry on being as they always are. So what is that? Telling that they are not taking responsibility for what they already know intellectually in terms of go and behave. So if that happens with us, the same. What is the solution then? If we identify the problem, which is the lack of responsibility, which is the irresponsibility, transferring the responsibility to the person. As I already told you, remember what I said? Instead of me going through and saying, do you still remember what I said? You have different ways how to look at that. But yes, it is empowering us and others.
Some of them suffer from short memory.
Well, they may say, oh, I forgot, I don't remember, yeah. We still, once we believe that we are all imperfect as valuable beings, we know that people are, so we can say it once, we can say it twice. But I think the maxim is 3, because the person will tell us, the person will give feedback if they are sincere and willing to learn. Because even if they cannot do everything, but is investing, then I think it's worthwhile continually helping and feeding as much as we can.
Do you think you should only give advice if someone asks you?
I think that would be wise.
Despite what you can see.
I think that would be wise. And we could slightly here and there suggest knowing how to do that, but also always considering where the other is. Because if we suggest something, the other is not there yet, the certainty almost is to put a barrier on. But in general, yes, we help others when they come and ask us, or we can also help them a lot through our way of being. When we choose to be more truthful, when we choose to be more honest, when we choose to be more sincere, that comes through our way of being, and that is a way of communicating too. Is that making sense? Anything else? Then we carry on here. Cynthia, read the next one first.
This is so predominant that only the strong characters are able to deepen their search for their own reality, finding themselves, attaining the self-encounter. They adopt an authentic behavior other than a continuous,
unstable and disturbing variation. Okay. So how is that now coming to us then? What is Joanna de Angelis, the spiritual benefactor, meaning when she says, this is so predominant that only the strong characters are able to deepen their search for their own reality, finding themselves, attaining the self-encounter. What is she meaning by that? When she says, only the strong characters.
You need to, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the journey is not for the faint-hearted.
The journey is not for them?
For the faint-hearted.
Okay.
It needs courage, isn't it, to face.
Okay. To face self.
So
yeah.
Unconditioned, unconscious condition.
Why does it need courage to face ourselves?
Because it goes against, seems to be going against what you want to do. So once you explore that what you want to do doesn't work and you're suffering, there's an opportunity to take responsibility for what you're feeling. But if that's not done, that takes courage.
Yes.
Because that's the only way you're going to get through the forest.
Correct.
There's no external.
Correct. And would it be right in saying that the barriers that are there that we are facing are the roots based on pride and selfishness? This is why it's so difficult to accept our own limitations. But in reality, Spiritism always teaches us to learn to love ourselves as valuable human beings as we are, despite of our shadows, despite of our limitations. But we always still bring pride and selfishness, and that makes it difficult on emotional level. But we can move on. We can choose to go beyond it. We just need to give ourselves new opportunities that we can train. Because once we put ourselves on the action level in this new way of being, then we feel the consequence of the positive reward that promotes. And in that way, we learn to self-convince us. Gosh, I behaved in that way. Oof, it was really challenging. But afterwards, I felt so much better. Then that encourages us to carry on next time around, because we need to repeat the experiences many times at the point that we break through the old vices. Anything that you have to say, child? Then it says, where did I stop? They adopt the authentic behavior other than a continuous, unstable, and disturbing variation. How do we say that? When we learn to be more honest and sincere with us, we become more authentic. Be more authentic means what? Huh? Be yourselves as valuable human beings. Less masks we need to wear, as we saw in the previous slides, in order to interact with people. We increase the ability to accept and to love ourselves as valuable human beings as we are already. Recognizing through self-awareness our limitations, but understanding that we are not our limitations. Because sometimes we identify with the limitations and we think that is what we are, isn't it? Then we get hooked. But we are not our limitations, as we saw previous in the slides that we went through. We more and more, because what happens when we engage in the self-encounter process? What happens with us? When we engage in the process of self-encounter, what happens with us? Transformation resulting in? Buddha is right in saying, as we are taking off the masks, we are more connected with the essence of ourselves, and therefore we have less needs to pretend. We become more freer with them. Although we recognize our limitations, we don't need to masquerade ourselves to hide them. We know they are part of us, but they're just part. It's not our totality. They are much more, and we are engaged in working in overcoming them. That brings safety, security, sentence.
Maybe not being effective, but you could choose to consciously wear masks because you don't want people to know, because you don't want to open yourself to it.
Yes, that we saw in the previous slides here when we started, sometimes the masks are part, but as long as we are not dominated by the masks, as long, for instance, in some moments and with some people in some situation, perhaps it's not yet healthy for me to just be honest and open. We need to also filter and know how we interact in any situation. But it's different when we hide our own shadows for ourselves. Can you see the difference here? Yeah? Okay. Anything else? Then we move on to the next one. Danusa, read that for us, please.
Until the candidate to equilibrium does not abdicate the mistaken approaches and does not assume oneself being who one really is, the individual will remain in one's neurotic misleading. Despite the analysis and treatment that one seeks, as soon as one is in a social group, one runs away of one's own disguise to the use of one's persona.
Okay, would you like to comment? We can go through.
So I think Janice is coming to, I'm sorry, I don't know what was happening before, but here is a point where we're getting the manifestation of an ill soul depending on how we choose mistaken approaches, does not assume oneself who really is. The individual will remain in one's the protection that the being tries to create, which is part of pride and selfishness, because it's that self-defense, that unnecessary self-defense, which can be extended, because we do need to defend, but there's no need for extensive. So when it becomes neurotic, meaning always thinking that others are out to attack or are out to dominate or out to do something, then it becomes a very sick state of soul. And it manifests through the attitude. So I think that's what she's saying there. So abdicate the mistaken choices is assuming responsibility for where the mistakes are made. Is pretty much the only cure, is what she's showing. Otherwise, it's going to have a snowball effect.
Precisely. And within this very neurotic humanism, very disturbed.
In the world of society, the society, and it becomes difficult to be in a society. So it comes to a stage where others are finding it very difficult to interact with us, and we're finding it difficult to interact with the world. And then other measures are needed to be taken depending on how bad that stage becomes. But what I find interesting at the end is when she says the group, in one way, in one's own disguise, the use of one's persona. And the question that comes to me is, what is the function of a persona? You know, because we have those masks. Real function of a persona, which is temporary and transitory, which is the name, which is the title, which is the position. So what is the real function of there? And then when I start really fixing, where is my place? What is my persona supposed to be doing here? I think that it eases out the neurotic state of mind.
So what would be your real place here, in any situation where we are?
And we about it on Sundays where we're studying. So the challenges of interrelationship, the challenges of obsession, which now is a clinical term, the challenges of family, of upbringing and society. So it's through these challenges that we're able to learn and to self-analyze. But the main purpose is to heal ourselves into that.
And also, apart from what you said, because when we enter this self-centered way of thinking, self-obsessive way, we are attracting other ill souls too. And we need to also cope energetically with all of these weight on a negative way. And then we have more work to do to heal, to get out of that state.
But the beauty of that is because we tend to victimize ourselves. So I've got these souls with me that are negative, and well, actually, if I put myself into that situation, then I'm capable of not only helping myself, but helping those around me.
Yes.
So that's, if we flip it, and to the point where I've actually been entrusted to take care of all of this hurt and suffering, so what am I going to do with it? Am I going to fall down with them, or am I going to carry on? And then we seek for help for that, isn't it? But I think...
Anything else, Cynthia?
I'm still trying to understand everything, because this one is quite difficult.
What is not clear for you?
Mistaken, when she says mistaken approaches would be what you said before about when we approach situations from the ego perspective.
Yes, the ego state of mind would be predominating. And in that way, following what Danusa says, we are not actively and consciously participating in our own healing process. We are not empowering ourselves from the center onwards, from the self-level onwards. Because as Danusa wisely said, whatever difficulties and challenges we may be facing, these are external elements actually aiming to promote us in from the higher self onwards. But if I stay in the victim position or in a negative loop, then I'm not taking the opportunity to re-educate myself. And then I get more ill instead of healing and cooperating in my own healing process. Because the healing process for all of us will go through self-knowledge, self-encounter, the ability that I take responsibility for myself in what I think, what I feel, what I do. And always understand responsibility within Spiritism as is the internal autonomy of the spirit, the being, the immortal being that we are, to learn that we have different choices how to engage in certain situations.
And the second part, and I think now I understand, when it's like you said before, when we know cognitively that we want to change, but as soon as we are in the situation again, we do the same thing as we were
Because it's
doing
easier.
before.
It is easy, and also, again, we need to learn we are not alone. Quite often, those who are with us that are not happy because we are progressing, we are willing to heal ourselves, they may also interfere us, and they also will trigger our own limitations. Through self-awareness, we are aware of all of that, and we are not focused on either transferring the responsibility on them, but we are focused on us and connected with our essence, and then be more alert, more aware, because we all will be tested on daily basis. So that we choose freely not to respond in the old way, but make effort to interact in a different way. The only thing that I would say then is in terms of, how was the word? Defend. I would rather prefer in the new way that we are learning, we have the need to protect us. The defend comes more from the ego level onwards. So as more as we connect with the essence and we learn to develop the essential values in ourselves, we naturally are already promoting this more independence, this more way of protecting us, energetically speaking. Because as more we think in a positive way, in a good way, because we are choosing to do that or forgiving, whatever it is, that becomes part of our energy field. And that naturally will repose any negative aspect that comes from us. Is that making sense? Mm-hmm. Is that making sense to me? Yeah?
Love is the best protection.
What?
Love is the best protection.
I would say that summarizes the healing for all of us. Love. The real love that comes from God, that is the best way of protecting ourselves. And in that way of learning love, in that reference, doing good for all, that also is the best way that we can do it. When it's genuine, when it's honest, when it's spontaneous. Because again, we are stimulating that power within us, which is love. Love is goodness in action, when it's genuine. Okay, so can we move on here? Then move on to the next one, which says, the individual becomes morally stable and stops. Oh, did I go through? Where was it?
Go backward.
This one? Yeah. The individual becomes morally stable and stops swearing that help one to overcome them. What is Joanna de Anjos telling us about hope therapy here? She is already presenting the mechanisms of the hope therapy, isn't she? How could we reframe it with our own goals? When we become healthier, because we are cooperating consciously in our own healing process, therefore empowering us from the self-level onwards, will we reach a state that we can laugh about our weak points or vulnerabilities? Do we? Yes. We can laugh about it. But when we are neurotic, oh my God, something is huge, we cannot even talk about it.
I mean, this is the extension of our selfishness, isn't it? Because if we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes, we don't allow others to make mistakes either. And then everything seems heavy. So that, and it changes there when you get to a stage where, you know, like, what stays in my mind is 60 years of Shiva Shavia working intensely is a minute with Jesus. Then really just really give ourselves time. And when we look back, as we go through these, look back at 10, 15 years ago, what would I tell myself? And I'd really just tell myself, just relax. Really, it's all gonna be okay, you know? And then when you get to that stage, you say you're able to, I wouldn't even say laugh, and I don't disagree with your churches, of course, but you just wouldn't feel the same weight you'd feel of the burden of this is what I am. It's not what I am, it's not who I am, it's a transitory stage where we've got imperfections and where we make mistakes. And that's okay, you know?
Okay.
There's a clear recognition, like you were saying earlier, that you are not there, it becomes clear that
Yes.
what you feel is not true. So it becomes lighter.
It becomes
You're able to see
yes.
that.
Because we are no longer in that state of mind, we are no longer identified with the shadows. Because when we are identified with the shadows, we intensify, it becomes heavy. But when we are lighting up through the self-healing process in terms of taking responsibility, I'm a valuable human being already as I am. So I talk about in a light-hearted way, because we are expanding the process of self-love. And we don't identify ourselves with the shadows, although they are part of us in a transitory phase that we are reintegrating in our learning process.
If we look at the studies of case studies of spirits as you that Release brings, that's one of the core problems, is not letting go of our own mistakes, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's like when she says previously the neurotic state, I would say, is all perfectionism. When in reality, we are not perfect beings. We have been created by God, simple and ignorant, and we are in the journey of perfecting ourselves. But we are valuable human beings since our creation. And although we are imperfect, perfecting, we need to address these perfectionism aspects, because that is one of the aspects that will help us to use mask and pretend to be who we are, and that becomes very heavy. Process that we are accepting ourselves and doing the best that we can in every moment. So it's not achieving perfectionism, but it's achieving.
I think trying to be good can be just as damaging. Trying to be good, you know?
Trying to be good can be.
Without the recognition of how things are within me. So,
Do you mean the people-pleasing pattern?
yeah.
Yes, the people-pleasing pattern will be against us. That will not be a model, a method of self-healing. That will intensify the shadows. And that will intensify the need to masquerade them. Is that what you say?
Being a people pleaser is a huge default, because what we end up doing is putting expectations on others, and others have no idea what expectations that we have put in this process of self-pleasing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet, there's still, and there's, I don't remember where it was that I read that, every time that I sacrifice something about myself to try and please others without doing it with the right intentions, what I'm actually doing is making the other a thief of whatever it is. I want to do that, and to truly know, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it benefiting really? You know, up until where can I go? The parameters. You know.
That Cynthia is becoming expert. You are more sympathetic with that word now, isn't it? Good, yeah. Then we finalize it with the last part that Joanna is presenting. Then, so would you like to read it for us, please?
Certainly. By removing the personalism of their act and concealing their alienating behavior, it does not intend to shock or assault other people. He only wants to be healthy, jovial, vulnerable, presenting himself as a person who seeks others in a healthy, enriching social relationship full of hopes. This individual takes Jesus as one's ideal psychotherapist.
Would you like to comment? What does that bring to us now, as we're coming to the end of our reflections in relation to hope therapy? How would we express it? What do we?
We all seek, when we're truly seeking health, what we're truly seeking is Jesus. The way we go about it and whether we get the right results or not is irrelevant, because that's the intention. So by removing the personalism of their acts and concealing their alienating behavior, does not intend to shock or assault others, although it may. People want to get to that stage. And if we understand that, then mistakes become less painful. We feel less hurt, because everyone is seeking that. And when I say Jesus, I mean peace of mind, peace of spirit, you know, understanding our purpose.
Correct. What else for us?
It's just a natural joy within us, isn't it? When the layers
When we allow the layers to fall down, let's say,
you don't have to create it.
you don't need to create what you aren't, because that takes a lot of energy. And that could be one of the causes, as we saw in the beginning, that we may even feel without energy or even depressed, because in order to sustain those aspects, it requires a lot of psychic energy. But we can use, as we follow here, the learners as we are, to use the same energy and to learn to be more loyal, more honest, more sincere. Always bear in mind that we are already valuable human beings as we are. We need to learn not to give that much attention to the shadows, but also to train our psyche that we are already beings of light, and allow ourselves in the healing process to look at the shadows as possibilities to expand the light within, the possibilities to expand the self-love process. Because when I recognize, I choose freely now to behave in a different way. And the best way that we carry on, not to feel frustration, as we saw in the previous slides or whatever, we follow Jesus, who is the greatest psychotherapist of all for all humanity. In that way, we will not feel frustrated. Why not?
Because you cannot add to your essence.
Because we human beings, we still are imperfect, therefore limited. And if I put a lot of attention into somebody else, to my expectations, I may sooner or later be invited by the universe to look at my own, let's say, values, which were wrong. But Jesus, being the perfect being who have been on earth, he will never frustrate us, or we will never feel frustrated if we follow his examples of living, which is nothing more to stimulate within us the natural laws, which are God's laws, which summarizing love for everyone. And in that way, we are restructuring ourselves, becoming more balanced, more centered. Is that making sense? So what do we do? How do we perceive hope therapy? Is a therapy. But what is hope therapy? I'm not understanding. I'm not with you. What is it? As we're coming to the end now, what is one of the energies that a spiritual benefactor actually trying to stimulate in us?
Looking at the impermanence of our imperfection.
Okay. What else?
Yeah, I would say the same. We can change.
We can change.
We can change. So that's why we should have hope.
Okay, we should.
Yes.
When we study Spiritism, inspiring lives, understanding Spiritism is the teaching that comes from God, who is love, who is the creator of everyone and everything. Therefore, as more as we evolve understanding these natural processes, instead of being so full of frustrations, as we saw in the previous slides, because the experiences become more relative. Is that making sense? We are potentializing ourselves more and more as valuable human beings as we already are, and choosing to actualize ourselves more and more, inspired by Jesus, who brings the right route in terms of self-fulfillment, in terms of self-love, self-forgiveness, and so on. And in that way, we are coming to the end. And I would kindly ask Janessa to do a closing prayer, please.
Dear Lord, Master Jesus, benefactor spirits, friends, with our hearts filled with gratitude for these moments where we're inspired to develop hope within ourselves, to study ourselves, to forgive ourselves, and to extend that loving forgiveness to all of those around us. Gratitude for Spiritism, for these moments where we unite as a spiritual family to study, to reflect, to unite, to reflect on love. Thank you, Lord. So pleased.
Wishing you all a good week and hope to be together next week as we carry on our studies as always.